Welcome to the fourth and final module of the Mindfulness Self-Compassion online program, or MindOp for short. Last week, you learned about a concept called self-compassion and were introduced to two types of meditations. A meditation to help you be more mindful of painful emotions, and a second meditation to help you think of painful emotions as a way to connect with other people around you. This week, you will learn about the third component of self-compassion, a concept called self-kindness. Specifically, we'll take a look at how certain beliefs may be holding you back from extending kindness towards yourself, and you'll learn to direct kindness towards yourself through a type of meditation and other forms of exercises. Self-kindness is the third component of self-compassion and is defined as the desire to extend kindness and understanding towards yourself instead of being overly self-critical and judgmental. We know from a lot of research, as well as through working with lots of people with elevated depression, anxiety, and stress scores, that we sometimes have a lot of resistance to extending kindness towards ourselves. One of the barriers is that self-kindness and self-compassion sometimes get confused with self-pity, which is excessive self-absorption over your own troubles or your own woes. Unlike self-compassion, however, self-pity is the type of pity or sympathy for yourself that tends to worsen feelings of isolation and loneliness. As we learned last week, an important component of self-compassion is the understanding that your struggles, distress, and painful emotional experiences are the threads that are shared by all human beings. So while self-pity and self-absorption are defined as being swept up in your own struggles and troubles, self-compassion opens you up to the understanding that your struggles and troubles unite you with the rest of humanity. Second, and unlike self-pity or self-indulgence, self-compassion is defined as an awareness of your own suffering combined with the motivation to improve conditions for yourself to lessen the suffering or distress. That is, self-compassion is an active stance towards suffering, with the ultimate goal of alleviating suffering for yourself. Self-pity, on the other hand, is often seen as an end in itself, without any active components to stop the suffering or improve conditions on the part of the experiencer. Have you heard of the saying, "Spare the rod, spoil the child"? Western societies often place a premium on self-criticism as a way to improve or to grow. Although small amounts of self-criticism can be important for personal growth, evidence from lots of research combined with evidence from work with thousands of people struggling with anxiety, depression, and elevated stress tells us that too much self-criticism is crippling. People who are overly self-critical tend to significantly underperform at work, school, or in social situations. They either perform poorly or don't bother to perform at all, given the fear of disappointing themselves and others. Research on self-compassion, on the other hand, tells us that people who can practice self-compassion and self-kindness tend to perform well in a variety of situations. Despite the folk wisdom that giving yourself a break or being kind to yourself is too self-indulgent, the reality is quite different. Practicing self-kindness can make you more effective at your job, at school, or socially. Finally, some people are resistant to self-compassion and self-kindness because they believe that they don't deserve to be kind to themselves. As we learned in previous modules, suffering and pain is the rule rather than the exception of life. To live is to suffer, and everyone experiences pain, disappointment, rejection, and failure at one point or another in their lives. And this happens for no fault of our own. So if self-kindness is then reserved to only those people who always experience success, joy, and always feel included, then no one, alive or dead, would ever be worthy of self-compassion. We and the lives that we live are imperfect by nature. Learning to understand and embrace this imperfection with a sense of kindness and befriending is a human right, not a privilege. So, to summarize, self-kindness is the third module of self-compassion, and it is defined as extending kindness and understanding towards yourself instead of being overly critical or judgmental. There's lots of resistance to extending kindness and compassion towards yourself, such as the fear that self-kindness and compassion sound too much like self-pity, or that if we're not self-critical, we will become too complacent, and/or that harsh criticism is necessary for self-growth. However, the reality is self-pity, which is defined as being absorbed by and overtaken by your own troubles, is very different from self-compassion, which helps you see your difficulties as a way to connect with other people. Turns out that self-compassion and kindness are a much better predictor of good academic, vocational, and social performance than self-criticism ever was, which actually often predicts poor performance. Finally, given that we're all imperfect and we all suffer through no fault of our own, everyone deserves kindness, respect, and compassion. When you're ready, go to the next page where you will be doing a few exercises about resistance to self-compassion and self-kindness.